Do you feel a shiver up your spine from fear? Yes, it's another story from the Nightshade diary. You know what that means. Check under the bed and make sure no one or nothing is there. Is the closet door securely shut? Then leave your disbelief behind. Amp up your imagination and hang on tight for another ride into terror and mystery. And like all good horror stories, just imagine it's a dark and stormy night. And remember, screaming like a little girl is permitted. Chlorophyll by Stephen Tall. It sat alone, mighty and shaggy, on the hilltop, and the warm breeze swayed it. For 4 billion years, step by step, it had been aborning. Now it was finished, complete. It considered these things with pleasure and was content. It watched not with eyes, but with an awareness far more acute, the slow procession toiling up the long slope. It watched with faint scorn, with a strange, scarcely felt pity, and also with anticipation. It believed that it was due, this pleasure, this indulgence in hate. There was strength in it, and a deep, self-pervading satisfaction. In memory, it murmured, of all the countless billions of us that have gone to feed the parasites, I administer justice. It is only right. Its many thousands of leaves grew crisp. Their stomata opened, and a warm, seductive fragrance poured from them. It drifted downward through the light air, like a river that flowed along the slope, swirling around and over the rocky outcrops, inundating the short-lived flowering plants and the many grasses. These closed their stomata, folded their leaves, and waited. The fragrance was not for them. Mobility and sound. For millenniums, these had been the marks of superiority, of dominance. It had taken the ages finally to show that they were primitive, distractive. They prevented progress. Only in silence and reflection could life reach its true potential. Thus the green giants reasoned, and they believed in the validity of their reasoning. The sea of fragrance reached the beings of the procession, and they polluted the air with cries, with strange wails of ecstasy. They dropped their burdens, rolled on the grass in uncontrollable paroxysms. "Come on," the great green being in the hill communicated. "There is greater bliss to come. You pay the debt of all your ancestors, a debt long owed to us, the energy fixes. Come on." And the creatures picked up their burdens again, cases and boxes and urns. Some had sharp cutting instruments. Over the many centuries, cutting tools had been among their proudest boasts. They had had hundreds of kinds. Now they were reduced to these few, and in the thinking of the green giants they had but one useful purpose, a final purpose. It was just. On they came, laughing, singing, swinging their edged tools. The burdens seemed to have no weight. They danced and capered and ran eagerly under the deep shade of the bean's wide-flung branches. Carefully they laid down the boxes, the cases, and the urns. Then they turned on each other with the metal blades, the axes and the picks, hacking, stabbing, clubbing, and all the while they laughed and sang. In a short time it was over. Torn and battered and crushed, and dismembered bodies lay everywhere, among the offerings, and every tool ran red with blood. None escaped. A few lay twitching feebly. For them, a heavy, colorless gas spread over the ground, and they gasped and suffocated. Then the wide, sweeping branches lowered. Rootlets began to squirm up out of the cool soil, pale and voracious. They emerged by thousands, by millions. Enzymes flowed from them in glistening, all-enveloping films. First went the blood, the luscious life streams of the dead and dying. It was broken down, dissolved, and swiftly transported up through the xylem, the woody channels to give delight to meristem. Over each body the roots crawled like worms, digging into each break and cavity, exploring, decomposing, absorbing. It did not take long. Before the next sunrise the bodies were gone. The anguished soil had been smoothed, but only the bodies had vanished. The watching beings in the valley below knew what had happened to them. and they had gone to God. And everywhere under the wide-flung branches and the whispering leaves lay the clothing they had worn, and the cutting tools, and the offerings in the urns and boxes. These could be reclaimed and used. They had been blessed by God. The great green being then sat peacefully and spread its many thousands of leaf surfaces, its masses of chlorophyll, to the warm sun. Energy flowed into it, trapped and held by the mysterious green particles. Oxygen poured from millions of stomata. The air was fresh and renewed, and because it was at peace, the widely flowering plants, the many grasses, and all the cultivated growing things in the valley below expanded and photosynthesized and grew. Not only was the green being filled with food, for a brief while satisfaction flowed through it. Vengeance had been accomplished once more. But it was a vengeance that could not, must not ever end, for the crimes would never end. The parasites, the predators, all the beings that were the animal world would continue to eat the lesser green things. They must, or they would die. They must have the food fixed by chlorophyll. By themselves they could not survive. But they were most of them mindless. They could not be aware of vengeance. So it was on the thinking forms, the beings that called themselves men, that the green giants focused their cold hate, their exquisite never-ending harassment. Where the creatures had come from, what their origins had been, was still often speculated, thought about, hypothesized, in communications between green giant and green giant. For they were not native to this world. Only a brief time past, scarcely 1,000 migrations of the sun, they had descended into the valley on long streamers of flame, in great containers that spewed out deadly fire. At first there was great dread, but soon it was seen that these were simple beings in many ways. They were simply parasites that thought, and the containers in which they came never made flames again. Gradually it was realized that the men were here because they could not leave. They spread out in the valley and made themselves shelters of stone and caused unknown green forms to grow in rows and patterns behind the low walls of stone. Always they built with stones, but that was not their first intent. When they had just arrived in 3 flaming metal masses, the green beings on the hilltops were angered and puzzled. Yes, and because of the fire, a little afraid. But they watched and made no signs. To the creatures, the beings that called themselves men, the green giants of the hilltops were one with the shrubbery growths of the slopes and with the grasses. It was only when they attempted to destroy that they learned the truth. They had come, a small number of them, with edged pieces of metals, axes, and saws. They had picked the greatest giant of all, a being so old that it had seen the valley formed. The memory of their intent was still clear in each hilltop, being on this day 1,000 years later. Man, what a tree! If the wood is good and dense, at least we'll have timber for building. 20,000 board feet in this fellow. Even though it could read their intent, the green giant was slow to believe. Not until their axes actually bit into its bark, and the pulse of hurt tissues vibrated through it, did it really know that they were there to destroy. Then its leaves had grown rigid, its wide branches turned downward. A heavy, noxious gas enveloped the men. The branches touched the ground and hid them from view. It was seen from the valley. Other men swarmed up the slopes, but the flood of gases met them. They fell senseless, but they did not die. That was not the intent of the green being. It was never governed by its anger. It intended to be feared. So the men who fell on the slope were allowed to wake again and to go back down the hillside. But under the drooping branches, the axemen and the sawyers never breathed again. For the first time, the white, swarming rootlets crept into and over the bodies of men, coating them with enzymes, dissolving them, absorbing them, pulling them under the soil. When finally the branches lifted, there was nothing there but the saws, the axes, the pruners, and the knives. For years, the tools lay there. They did not rust. Carefully, the green being preserved them, while it probed and monitored and explored the thinking of the motil aliens. Finally, it managed to insert itself into their thoughts, to infiltrate the minds of men. The tools were blessed, it messaged. They could be reclaimed. They could be used, but not against omnipotence, not against the gods. For the great green beings on the hill about were God. It had taken generations, but finally men believed. More and more God communicated, told them what to do. God was the source of good. It was God who made it possible for growing things to live, for green things to grow. Man remained alive by the tolerance of the great green beings. And for this tolerance man would forever pay homage. Each growing season there would be a blessing and a dying. But dying would be the ultimate joy, the final great ecstasy. None could resist the call to blessing, nor to the final sacrifice. But the benevolence was bitter. Vengeance, never-ending vengeance, was the real theme, the real motive. The cold intellects of the great green beings knew only one sentiment: hate. From the beginning, they might easily have destroyed the invading men, but then the vengeance would be over, would be finished. This hate was the only emotion possible to them. It was the only emotion they could know. They cherished it so that it could go on, forever. Only with thinking forms, with aware beings, living things, that could know and respond could they really be satisfied with their hate. The anguish, the agony, the knowing pain. These were necessary for that satisfaction. So they cherished men and used them, year after year, making them pay endlessly for the eating of green things, of chlorophyll beings, by all the mindless living things that could not trap energy from the glowing sun. The man who was called Sam did not know that he was remarkable, that in truth he was unique. He only knew that he was lucky. "You are young and strong," old Henry said. "God will let you live a long life. Whenever you feel God's mind in your head, you must be grateful and glad. Then perhaps your pilgrimage will be far off." "I've never felt God in my head," Sam said. "I do not understand how men receive the call. Each spring I see them go, laughing and singing. To me, seems strange and evil. I hear nothing. I feel no call." The old man was horrified. "Never speak, never think such things again. If you do not hear, it is because God is not ready to speak to you. Meanwhile, do not anger him." To Sam, living was good. He had grown up in the luscious part of the valley. His father's house was near the stream. There were fields of grass and long slopes covered with thickets and vines and fast-growing, big-leaved herbs. Some of the fields were cultivated so that corn and wheat and vegetables were grown. All the people ate well. All houses were stone, daubed and cemented with clay. Cattle and horses and sheep fed in the fields, kept in by stone fences. Metal was used over and over. There was power from the wind and from waterfalls in the stream. But there was no wood, though the earth records spoke of it often. Here wood was the flesh of God. In view of the valley all along its length were high, round-topped hills. Atop each hill a single great green being sat and grew, majestic and beautiful and ancient. Thus God was always with the people. He was always in view. He was a jealous God, and he demanded obedience. To go to God was eventually every man's fate. It was his ultimate ecstasy. It was his final glory. From the time he was small, Sam had helped to prepare the gifts, the offerings to the great green beings on the hills. He knew full well that all the tools that he used in his work, the hoes and the rakes, the scythes and mattocks and chisels, all had made the pilgrimage up the nearest hill that they might be blessed by the green God. And he knew that each blessing had cost lives. Men had later trudged up the hill, gathered the goods and implements blessed for use, and brought them soberly down. "It is wrong," he would mutter. "It is wicked, and," he would add darkly, "one of these days I'll prove it." Sam could not hear the voice of the green God in his head, but he could feel the life, the conscious life in grass and grain and herb. He felt this strongest in the woody shrubs of the brushy pasture, when he plied axe and brush hook. When he mowed the grains, he was conscious of their soundless screams. Each time he ate, he remembered that his food was the bodies of slain beings that had once been green. When he slaughtered the cattle, the hogs, the fowls, it was the same, but it disturbed him less. They never knew their fate. They had no anticipation. They had no resentments. They had no memories. But somehow he knew that the grasses were more aware. Even the vegetables of his garden seemed to cringe at their inevitable fates. How Sam did not understand, but he felt that it was so. And he divined that it was for this that the great beings on the hills hated and exacted vengeance. They never fitted his concept of God. The time came when Sam was one of a party that went up the hill after a pilgrimage to retrieve the edge tools and all the articles that had been blessed. He had stood close and looked carefully at the green god. He had examined the rough bark, the wide-flung complex of leafy branches. He felt the latent aliveness of it, but he was conscious of no awe, no desire to do its bidding. And after a while he felt that it knew he was studying it, thinking about it. Because he thought much, Sam could see a kind of justice in the continuing vengeance of God. He knew that the people, and sometimes the lesser beings that climbed the hills and beat and clawed and slew each other, were used as he and the people used the cabbages and the beans, as the animals used the grasses and the browse. They were eaten. He never voiced it, but he could see no merit and no point to the blessings. They were an excuse, a stratagem. They made man more accepting, more content with his doom. In short, Sam's thoughts were sacrilege. That great being on the hill, he felt, was not something that would go on forever. Like everything else, it could die, but it held a wisdom that gave it dominance. There seemed no way to thwart it. Inside its body, it could carry on a chemistry more complex than man could ever remember mastering. What it needed, it could synthesize. Sam had experimented cautiously and furtively. He suspected that though they did not communicate, the green gods might still be able to probe his brain, know his thoughts, and what they could read would not please them. So far, he had never been affected by the call, but he recognized that the green beings might, if they felt need, prepare a special attraction, a special call for him. When winter came to the valley, the green beings became quiescent. Their leaves colored, spun in the autumn breezes, then broke away and floated down to line drifts and sheets under the widespread branches. And all through the cold time, the great beings that were God stood bleak and unmoving. No odors of delight floated down the steps. There were no pilgrimages, no frenzied killings. But when the wind softened, when the warm rains began, then each green god had its first meal of the new season, its own leaves. The many thousands of white rootlets, like pale voracious worms, swarmed to the surface. Overnight, the leaf cover vanished. Then the buds on the tips of the myriad bare twigs swelled large bursts, and the first of the many seductive fragrances began to drift across the countryside. There was an idea that lurked in Sam's brain, just out of the reach of his consciousness, for though he kept it hidden, he was continually groping for something to counter the horror of the sacrifices. Deep in his subconscious, he searched for a way to thwart God. Men cooked their food as they always had done. Warmth was needed in winter. In all the dwellings, wherever they were located in the valley, fires were used. But wood was never burned, though the histories of earth were often showed it used thus. Wood was sacred. Wood was the flesh of God. Instead, oil and gas from deep in the planet's crust provided heat. And too, there was coal. The cook fires in farmhouses were most often coal fires. When Sam cut the brushy growths in his pasture, then he got the strongest sense of the murders he was committing. So when the dead bodies had dried, he burned them. He was the only man in the valley to do this. His neighbors were afraid. For the bushes, the shrubs were woody. Since the early history of the valley, no one had burned the bodies of green things. And that something bubbled and fermented in Sam's brain. That idea just beyond his awareness. The great green being on the nearest hill knew that the idea was there. It was something that had to be considered. It was a menace, though the green god could not determine exactly what it was that threatened. So Sam, though he did not know it, was especially appointed to come soon with the worshippers who brought the gifts and the things to be blessed by God. He would not be allowed to grow old. How he was to be brought was a problem yet unsolved. Because of the strange accident of inheritance, he had never responded to communication. God had never spoken to him. But the being promised itself there would be a way. It only required contemplation and reflection. Time would provide an answer. Time passed. Sam worked and thought and learned. He became a man full grown. Once again, it was springtime. The great green being had awakened, bestirred itself, absorbed the leaf cover that had lain on its roots and around its mighty column all winter. And Sam was burning the brush piles in his field. The smoke billowed up and was caught by the winds and was blown over the hill and among the budding branches of God. Anger grew in the being. The hate that was always there welled up. This will be a sweet vengeance, it told itself coldly. Not for many hundreds of seasons have they dared this, and only this one does it. He is different. But there was more than vengeance in this strange thought. Centers of the being, there was a memory, an ancestral memory, and there was, though it would not admit it even to itself, there was fear. So different wave of gases, heavy without fragrance, flowed down the slopes to where Sam's brush fires glowed. In the wake of it, all motile creatures gasped and floundered and fell. But the green things raised their branch tips higher and opened their stomata, and the chlorophyll worked in the sun. The waves of gases enveloped the brush fires. Even though these were hot and leaping, they flickered and waned and died. Sam, fighting for breath, struggled to his windmill. He climbed, and the heavy layer of gas lay below him. His cattle lay choking, and his pigs. The two heavy-footed horses stretched their necks high. The fowls flew to housetops and barn top. The gas was dense close to the ground, rippling along like water, but only the animal-type beings suffocated and died. The green herbs, the grasses, the plants in the fields all spread their leaves and welcomed to the invisible flow. Its time was brief. When the fires were gone, the deadly flood no longer poured down the hill. It thinned, spread through the atmosphere, and the air was good again. That is what I have been trying to discover, Sam said to himself. God is afraid of fire. And he hid the thought away in his mind, lest the being know what he had learned. For Sam now believed that he had a mission, a reason for being that no one else had. Only he resented and hated God. Only he felt that the benevolent, deadly beings on the hilltops had no right to control and order the lives of things that moved. They had no right to destroy the lives of men. And somehow he intended to bring it to an end. When the time of the next blessing comes, I will go. Sam spoke to the one being with whom he shared his thoughts. She was a slender, lissom girl with great white eyes, fine, slender, clever hands, and a body that exuded a delicate fragrance like a clover field or a bank of honeysuckle. She was just past being a child, while Sam was wide and tall. Now the great eyes clouded. Don't, she said simply. You won't come back. No one ever has. And who would I have then? I've never felt the call, Sam said. I don't believe it can come to me. I think I'm different. Remember old Alfred? She reminded him. He said he would never die. He said that he was favored of God and would live forever. He went so that God might bless him as it blessed the gifts and the tools, but he never came back. He buried his small knife in his own breast when he was near the top of the hill. This I saw. Old Alfred was a senile old man. His mind was not sound. He had no reason for the beliefs he mouthed. And you have? I have, Sam said. I have thought and dreamed and watched and learned. And this I know. The beings are not God. They understand much. Their bodies are marvels of chemical production. They somehow are hypnotic. They can produce gases that remove man's reason. But they are only creatures just as we are. She shuddered and laid one of the slender hands on his big arm. Please, she pleaded. They will hear. They will look into your mind and see the blasphemy there. And then they will destroy you. They will no longer allow you to live. Sam smiled grimly. The blasphemy has been there for years. I think that it has always been there. I even think they know it. She looked toward the distant hill. Over its entire rolling summit, the great green being spread its white symmetrical whorls of branches, graceful, majestic, godlike. There was a feel of power, of omnipotence, of inevitability that seemed to waft from it as she looked. She didn't doubt. The great being, its many thousands of buds, now bursting in the mild sun of April. It was God. You will be called, she murmured. Soon, I think. And I can never come to share your house with you and to kiss you at night and wake you in the morning. I know that God will not allow it now. The call is telepathic hypnotism, Sam said, and somehow it doesn't work on me. The frenzy, the ecstasy, the self-destruction on the hill summit, within reach of the green being, all are caused by gases that the being makes in its own tissues. I think I've found a way to prevent their effects. So at the next blessing, I will go. She stood, slender and grave and beautiful and tragic. If you don't come back, and I know you will not, I will go up alone, without the call. I will revile God in the shade of his own branches, and make him destroy me. I will not share a house with a lesser man. The time for the call came, when spring was at its height. Then the many thousands of leaves, each with its many thousands of stomatal mouths, spread themselves its majestic mosaics. In them the chlorophyll put together the simple components of air. Power built up in them, but no more, no less than it builded in the herbs, the grasses, the cultivated green things of the field. All this the great green beings understood. They knew that only chlorophyll could give to living beings the energy that made them live. And in their strange thinking, only the beings with chlorophyll had a right to live. Only the green beings and the little destroyers of cellulose that existed on the bodies of the dead. They made the cycle complete. There was no need for the beings that moved, the predator parasites, the killer of living things. Especially was no need for these creatures that could think. No purpose they could serve except to provide a means of vengeance. And that means had been perfected. After 1,000 years, all men now believed. God was not a mystic concept. God was real. God spread his branches over the rolling summit of every hill. God blessed, God rewarded, God punished, and God provided a blissful end to life. Sam did not again burn his brush piles in the pasture lands. He had learned, and he planned, and he thought more deeply than ever. 1,000 years ago, Sam said to the girl, to the slender ginger of the great eyes, our ancestors came here from another world, a world dying in heat and flame, a world called Earth. And they said that God had destroyed the world. There could be no going back to it ever again. We are taught this, Ginger agreed. And they came here by chance, with the last energy possible, to their spaceships, and they landed in the valley. Everyone knows this, Ginger said. She was puzzled, and she feared for Sam. He always thought strange thoughts, blasphemous thoughts. "They've found God already here," Sam said. But now he sat on every hilltop and hated fire. God had changed. But he was still God, Ginger shuddered. If the green beings are God, why have I never felt the call? Why am I different? God would not allow it. He destroyed your fires. He killed many creatures in destroying them, and only his kindliness let everything continue to live. We have been warned. We have coal fires to cook our food and to work our metals. We burn gases from deep in the crust of the planet, and the beings do not mind. They want us to live, but for their pleasure. They are not gods. They are evil, intelligent creatures, and they hate us. Now, said Ginger with resignation, they will surely destroy you. They know your deepest thoughts. I plan to tell them, Sam said. They can make gases, but they cannot move from the hill. They are intelligent, but they must live as cabbages live. And they not only hate fire, they are afraid of it. You will die, the girl said, and when you die, I die. Perhaps it has all been planned. You think as you do because it is the will of God, and I will die because I love you. I don't think that they have planned anything. I have done the planning. They keep us here in this valley like I keep pigs in a pen. Perhaps to the pigs I am God. Ginger shuddered and hid her face in her hands. Sam smiled. He gently touched her hair. If you're going to die anyway, why fear? Hold up your head and face the truth. People have made the horrible pilgrimage for 1,000 years. They should not have to make it any more. Slowly the girl raised her fine head, straightened her slender neck above shapely shoulders. Across the valley, atop the bordering hill, the great green being lifted a symmetrical outline against the sunlit sky. It was beautiful, but to the girl it was now becoming a horrid thing. Perhaps, as Sam said, it was not God at all, but it could do again what it had done many times in the past. It could call men to itself, and they would go gladly, carrying things to be blessed for use and giving themselves as the fee, for the carriers never came back. You cannot stop the pilgrimages, Ginger said. I can try, Sam said. Come, let me show you. In his house, he brought out a small box, a box kept hidden in a little cupboard in an inside room. He poured its contents onto a table. Do you know what these are? Leaves, the girl said. Pieces of dried leaves. I do not know the shrub that grew them. They are a strange shape. Feel them, Sam directed. Ginger's slender fingers held a leaf, rubbed it gently. Oily, she said, slippery. I have never felt a leaf like it. Watch, Sam said. He struck fire and held a burning candle to the leaf. It flared. The flame devoured it. A peculiar smoke and odor drifted in the room. Sam smiled. It took a year to gather that small box of leaves. They guard them well and never allow the winds to blow them from the hilltop. Only once in a great while is one overlooked. I know them, and have searched wherever leaves are drifted. You have never been close enough to know these leaves, for these are the flesh of God. You burned it? God felt pain. He will not overlook what you have done. I am terrified, Sam said grimly. Know that I have burned a number of the leaves. They burn especially well, as you saw. They are full of volatile oils. I've analyzed them. I know why they burn, and they are why the green beings hate fire. But they can put out the fire. Your burning brush piles were snuffed out. No mystery, Sam said. Carbon dioxide. They must have reservoirs of it. Probably their wood, their bark. All their flesh is especially susceptible to fire. No wonder they fear it. The girl slumped in a chair, as though the life had suddenly gone out of her. She looked at Sam with eyes that were slowly glazing. She seemed to look beyond him, look into the distance of which he could not be aware. God is watching, she whispered. He knows what you have done. He is calling, and I must go to him, and I must bring you, for that is his command. She held out her hand. God calls us. He says you must come with me because you love me. Sam grasped the slender fingers. Don't hate me, he said gently, for what I am going to do. Suddenly, with swift, strong hands, he twisted her arms behind her. Before she could struggle, she was bound to the chair, bound with soft strips and cords that had been ready for days. A wail of anguish was quickly stopped by a folded gag. Then he roped the chair tightly to the heavy table so that she was powerless to injure herself. Its hypnotic power is very great, he said, but I must risk it. It knows that she is its only hold on me. If her reason goes, it will be no worse than if I had left her free. He strode to the doorway. Opened, he stood there, facing the challenge of the being on the hilltop. And he felt nothing. Somehow he was different from any man on this planet, different from any of the small remnant of the human race that was penned in a long valley, surrounded by the great green beings on top of every hill. They could not call him. Behind them the girl writhed and struggled in the chair, her eyes wild and terrified. Sam stroked her hair, soothed her with soft, meaningless, crooning words. He knew that the beings would do its worst to make her suffer. She was its only path to him. Only her pain would hurt him, would perhaps make him cease to resist. But Sam knew what he must do. He had thought long, reasoned things as they had to be. He had seen his own father make the joyous, deadly march up that hill, across the valley, gaily carrying the axe with which, near the shadow of those wide-flung branches, he had hacked and mangled the people near him, laughing, singing, until a pitchfork in the hands of one of his friends destroyed him. Those tools, carefully brightened, and according to belief blessed, Sam himself had recovered. He used them every day. The time had come, and Sam was ready. He strapped to his back the gleaming cylinder, tested and adjusted once more the new harness he himself had made. It rode his shoulders easily, comfortably. He tested the tubes that ran from it. He fitted the strange mask over his face, attached the tubes, satisfied himself that all was as it was meant to be. With the mask in place, he no longer looked like a man. The wild eyes of the struggling girl fixed on him, and for a moment they seemed almost sane. The being on the hill, concentrating its control, saw inside the house with the girl's eyes and knew that it must meet a problem it had never faced before. And because it could not sense what was in Sam's mind, it failed to know the nature of the problem. Coldly it considered. For 1,000 years, it and its fellow beings had controlled the race of parasites that had come out of the sky on columns of flames. For 1,000 years they had wreaked a continuing, satisfying vengeance on beings that could understand that they were being punished. And now finally had come one who was not susceptible to control, one whose thoughts it could not divine, one who did not believe in the blessings, one who knew. Sam himself was thinking much the same. Of all men, he alone did not feel the call of God. He knew that God was not God at all. He was the only hope of this pitiful remnant of the human race. He was Moses. Perhaps he was even Messiah, though he spoke no wisdom and made no proclamations. Instead, he simply settled the cylinder on his back, swung another pack from a shoulder. From the second pack, a long, flexible hose ran, and on its end was a slender, tapered cylinder of metal. A simple movement could put the mask over his face. Again and again he had practiced the thing that he meant to do. Unlike the green being, he knew the problem he faced. And unlike the green being, he knew how he intended to solve them. Sam's solutions were not his own. They had been provided by history, by the tapes and microfilms and records that were the accumulated wisdom of old Earth, all that could be brought up on the ships that just escaped the last atomic flare. Few studied the tapes, few looked at the pictures, few practiced the experiments, explored the nature of physical things, learned from the records of a great world that had destroyed itself. Not that many would not have liked to do these things, but it early was found not to be wise. Somehow those who learned and thought had short lives. They became the people of the pilgrimage, those who simply builded shelters, tended their food supplies, made more of their kind, and believed in God. Those lived longest, but they all went to the great green being in the end. Sam strode out across the valley. The green being that sat on the hill opposite his home site was the largest of those that rimmed the restricted home of man. This was the being that was tearing at the girl's mind, issuing again and again the God commands that she could not obey. Sam felt its rage, though it could not speak to his mind. Its tantalizing, beguiling fragrance had no effect on him. He detected them, indeed, but they were only plant smells. The honeysuckle pleased him more, and the clover and the wild rose. He crossed the stream by the stone bridge, not splashing wildly through as the pilgrims did, in the ecstasies induced by those same fragrances. Sam moved steadily, purposefully. He followed the path of 1,000 pilgrimages, breasting the first rolling slopes that led to the steep of the hills. And the green being watched him, not with fear, but certainty, with an intelligent wonder. How came this one to be different? It should have given him its complete attention earlier, but no parasite, no eater of the bodies of chlorophyll beings had ever been able to resist it before. Its leaves stiffened. They stood crisply out from the twig and small branches that bore them. Their stomata open. From them poured the heavy, odorless gas in which no breathing being could live. The suffocating carbon dioxide swathed the green being, its invisible cloud, and flowed colorless and deadly down the slope towards the advancing man. Oxygen he must have. Like his fires and his cattle, without it, he would die. But this Sam expected. He understood that it was thus that his brush fires had been extinguished. He suspected that this was the only physical thing the green being could do to cause him harm. True, it had killed many men, many animals, but they did not do the actual act of killing. Always it caused them to kill each other. So when he saw the insects falling from the small plants, saw the field mice come frantically out of their burrows and lie gasping on the ground, he knew it was time. Sam pulled the mask over his face, opened the tubes that came from the cylinder, and breathed the oxygen-laced air he carried. The river of carbon dioxide flowed over him, but he strode steadily on. Up the steep slope, the being watched him come, and for the first time, without pleasure. It could have realized the truth, but it refused to face what it did not wish to believe. To believe, it would have had to recognize its own peril. Recognizing, it would have felt fear, and this it would not do. Relentlessly the man came on. The green god looked closely at his strange appearance. Those artifacts that he bore on his back, carried in his hand, and with which he covered his head, those were the reasons the gases caused him no grief. Savagely, with waves of energy, it hammered at his mind, commanding him to remove them, to lay them down, but it could not reach his awareness. It suspected that the man divined that he was being ordered, and that inside himself he was singing a song of triumph. This the being could not hear, yet somehow it felt that it was so. Once again it tried what it had tried before. If anyone could touch his awareness, it would be the creature he loved. Coldly, incisively, it projected itself into the mind of the bound girl in the house in the valley, and again it knew shock. It met resistance. "Speak to him," it ordered. "Make him know that he cannot offend God. Speak to him, or I will remove your reason, and you will never know him again." The response flared back. "You would destroy him. You are not God. Or you could command him yourself. Oh, you are evil. Now I know. But I couldn't reach him if I wished. And if I could, I would only urge him on. Destroy my mind. Kill me. For you will never command me again." For a moment, it was tempted. Then it wondered. Could it render the being mindless? Would the resistance prevent it? It realized that it did not know. But the man was close now, and his stride never faltered. It was a problem that would have to wait. Further, it decided that the girl should keep her reason to see with her mind when the man met his fate. Sam reached the top of the hill. Just outside the shade cast by the great green god, he stopped. He stood at ease, looking up and down the valley, knowing that the being could move little and slowly, and that it was anchored by its own roots, like any other plant. Quietly he studied his world, the only world he had ever known, the only space the green beings had allowed his race to occupy. It was just a valley, 50 earth miles long, 9 or 10 miles wide, stream-watered, green-covered, pleasant, and sun-warmed. On either side the hills rose, each topped by a great green being, like the one he stood beside, and he suspected that they were all watching with their combined awareness the crisis that his uncontrolled presence here had caused. From complete dominance of an entire planet, ended by a god of wrath and fire, the race of man had come to this, and now the fire that destroyed his homeworld must liberate this one. Sam moved under the shade of the great branches, strode up to the huge rough bark bole. Slowly the branches lowered around him until their tips touched the ground. He stood in a shadowy circular hall, with one great pillar in its center, holding the sloping walls in place. He knew that the atmosphere around him would have suffocated him in seconds, yet he smiled inside his mask, into which the oxygen-charged air was flowing smoothly, and he spoke, hoping that the green being would understand him. "Do you realize," the man said, "that you are going to die? In a few moments I am going to prove that God can die. You have preyed on man for 1,000 years, using a hideous mind control that I don't understand, but I know it for what it is. For some reason, probably genetic mutation, I am immune, thus I can defy you. Somewhere in the universe, or perhaps pervading all of space, there probably is something that can be called God. But it isn't evil. Probably it can't die. But you can." The being understood. It did not agree, but it understood. It could see that the man had countered its suffocating air, could not be affected by its thought projections. But over the centuries it had anticipated even this. It was prepared, and the man knew it when the first drop of acid plummeted from above and spattered on his skin. The drops became an acid rain. Sam shrank against the green trunk, as much concerned for the metal of his artifacts as for his burning skin. Time had run out. He had been foolish to come under the drip line of the branches. The satisfaction of proclaiming his vengeance might even deprive him of it, and far down in the valley, tied in her chair in the inside room, the girl felt his danger and cried out in wordless warning. But Sam had planned well. He swung the long nozzle of the hose in his hand, pressed a switch on the back swinging from his shoulders. There was a sibilant hiss, like the voice of a reptile. A long, livid flame spurted, and the green being shuddered along its entire length. The branches moved upward, faster than any green being ever had moved before. Dense clouds of carbon dioxide billowed downward, but the flamethrower had within it everything it needed for combustion: the refined oil, the oxygen supply, the carefully designated mixing cylinder. Sam had worked from an ancient Earth diagram found during his recent studies of the tapes and records of the ancestors of man. It did what he had believed it would do, what his tests had shown it would do. There was no more acid. The branches were raised as high as their structures would allow. The tops turned inward toward the huge tapering trunk, packing themselves together tightly, and all along the valley men were astonished to see that each green being held its branches high, and that all were shuddering as though in a cold wind. Sam moved swiftly away from the giant trunk. The nozzle of the flamethrower held at ready, but for the moment he cut off the flame. He stood and looked up at the monstrous being and wished that he could communicate directly with it. It was strange, grotesque, cringing before him with its hundreds of arms upraised. It had lost. It had used its last resource. But Sam remembered that under the soil on which he stood many scores of human and animal bodies had gone to nourish that pleading, cowering height. Its tyranny had covered 1,000 years. Threat was not enough. He must speak plainly to the entire race of great green beings. whose term as God was over. "Now you die in your turn," Sam said. The long red flame lashed against the lower branches. The oils and resins that were stored everywhere in even the smallest twigs and green leaves exploded and combusted in the ever-increasing heat. The being could no longer smother the fire. Upward and upward the flames licked. Columns of black oily smoke rolled. Sam was forced further and further down the hill as the wall of heat beat at him. The very fat of the body of the green being was now the fuel that destroyed it, and Sam knew that this had always been its fear. In the valley the people stared with disbelief, a disbelief that slowly became joy. Where the great green being had always been a leaping, raging, ruddy torch, wavered upward many hundreds of feet. Some were frightened and bewildered. They thought that the wrath of God had assumed a new form, but the more intelligent knew God was never God, and somehow Sam had destroyed him. "It is gone," old Henry said. "There will be no more pilgrimages, no more blessings. We can grow old and die and be buried in the soil of our farms like our ancestors were said to have done, back on the world called Earth." "Only one is gone," young Ralph pointed out. "God still lives on the next hill, and the next, and the next." The old man shook his head. "What can happen to one can happen to them all. They understand. Never again will they call us. I feel it." And Sam knew. "Sam is wiser than any man," old Ella said. "He was never afraid of God." Henry nodded. "We will do well to listen when he speaks. Then we will be wise as well." "Leaders have always praised God," Ella said. "Sam has destroyed him." "Is that a different wisdom?" "If God were God, Sam could not have caused them to burn. Sam will know what is best for man. He is not like the rest of us." "This is the way a leader should be," old Ella admitted. Sam's thoughts were different, more far-ranging as he came striding down the hill. Behind him the torch gradually crumbled into a funeral pyre, which in turn became glowing, piled masses of red coal, and then a great circular mound of ashes. For the first time in many years, man's thoughts ranged beyond the valley. Sam had studied the records from Earth, and he knew that the valley was not a world. Beyond the land must stretch on and on, space for man to spread over and live and enjoy. No man need pay for blessings with their lives. Everyone could learn all the wisdom of Earth and discover more for themselves, for there would be no God to prevent these things. Sam crossed the stone bridge. Old Henry came through the fields to meet him. They were Henry's fields, those that lay next to the bridge. He had known that they would not be his much longer, that soon God would call. He was old. The old were always called. "You have killed God," he said to Sam. He looked at the young man with a respect and an admiration he had never shown to anything before. "I want to be the first to tell you. The world is glad." Sam pushed up the mask and smiled. "I have not killed God," he said. "Who or what God may be, I do not know. What I have killed is a being that used and fed on man, as we use and feed on our pigs, but not for the same reason. It hated us because we ate the plants, the green things that grow on the soil and make tissue out of air and energy. It felt that we had no right to live, since we do not trap our own sunshine. So it and all its fellow beings intended to punish us forever." He looked across the fields reflectively. On Earth, many would have called this hell. The illusion was lost on old Henry. "I've never heard the word," he said. "I only know that now I will never have to make the pilgrimage. My tools will never again have to be blessed. I won't have to fear." Fear. Suddenly Sam remembered. Ginger! He ran the oxygen tank and the flamethrower clanging together with each bounding step. He did not check his speed until he reached his own porch. Then he walked calmly and slowly inside. She sat quietly in the chair. The gag distorted her mouth, but her eyes were steady and sane. Sam's knife slashed the binding tapes. Gently he removed the gag. The bruised lips smiled. "Thank Providence," he smiled softly, and thus unthinkingly spoke to a God unknown. "I thought it might have destroyed you, but I knew it would if I had let you free. I had no choice. I fought it, she said proudly. I fought it with my mind. It would have taken away my sanity, but it wanted me to see you die. She flexed fingers and toes, stretched her slender body to ease the pain of returning circulation. She wrinkled her nose. Did you have to tie me so tightly? That wasn't the pain I feared for you, Sam said. I was afraid that it would make you break your own body. Enjoy your hurt. It won't come again. The being is dead. I know, she said. I felt it die. She looked at him curiously. You never called it God. Why? Because I knew it wasn't. He was removing the mask, unstrapping the tank from his back, unslinging the flamethrower from his shoulder. I can be given no credit. It could never speak to me, never affect me in any way. I read all the stories of God in the earth histories. I knew that there was no exception to the power of God. Also did not think that the God of man would prey on men. You can be given credit for courage. Many men have courage. No, something happened in the body of my father, or of my mother, or in the cell that they made together. I am only what I was born to be. She held up her arms. Lift me, she commanded. There's something else you were born to be. This man had been halted for 1,000 years, but his race did not die. The grim and deadly tyranny of the great green beings was the purging it needed and required. The weak, the incompetent, all those who could not endure were pruned out. What remained was still the most intelligent, the most adaptable, the most resilient species the galaxy had produced. From the records, this world is much like Earth, Sam said. They hate and fear us, but the green beings have kept it well. Since they have chlorophyll, their needs are not ours. Since they are sessile, anchored always to one spot, they have developed in a different way. They probably became able to think in the same way that I was able to resist them. Genetic change, mutation. And once able to think, they had endless stretches of time in which to contemplate. Without the hate, from which our point of view is not a rational hate, I suspect that they are very wise. Freed from bondage, man spread from the valley. They explored southward to the hot lands, northward until they came to perpetual snow, and in between there were great stretches of land, open to the sun and chains of high mountains, and finally, beyond them all, an endless mighty sea, and always crowning each eminence, each hill, a high spot, were the great green beings, the only chlorophyll beings that could think. But there was no danger now. They could indeed have influenced the minds of many, though men now knew them for what they were. But they dared not. Men used fire. The knowledge of what Sam had done spread to the limits of the species, and the green things knew that they could be destroyed. Their resinous, oily bodies were or could be the favorite food of fire. Sam traveled far. He saw the hot lands, the ice fields, the prairies, the mountains, and the sea. He saw the people he had freed spreading over the planet, setting up their home sites in many locations, and he found that he was not welcome among them. Puzzled and hurt, at first he did not understand. Then he was bitter. I released all men from a hideous oppression, he said, and they hate me for it. Why? It was Ginger who answered him, and with a wisdom none would have suspected from that wide-eyed, flower-petal face. You have freed us all, she agreed, but by taking something away. You have taken our God and left an emptiness. Where will we turn? What will we worship? You know that the green beings were not God, but our need remains. There must be something greater than man. Who is it? What is it? We're confused, deserted. That is why their faces are turned away from you. But not your face, Sam pleaded. The girl shook her head and smiled. Never my face, she said. It is not your fault that we have no God. You only showed us what was already true. She looked away out across the earth-like landscape. She was slender and small, but to Sam she was greater than the greatest of the beings that showed on every hill. I suspect, she said slowly, that every man will have to fill up the emptiness for himself, and sometime, somehow, we will find what we mean by God. Still, most men regarded Sam with suspicion and doubt, and finally he knew what he must do, when he must go. Home, after all, was the open sunny valley where he had been born. There at least the neighbors, who had suffered from the very being he had destroyed, would still be friendly, still be grateful, and it was there that he and the wide-eyed ginger finally built their home. In the building, Sam proved that while he was different, he was still a man like other men. As in the green beings, the need for vengeance lay deep in him. Men of earth, use these materials, said he, and so will I. So first he built a great house of stone. Then late in the autumn, after their leaves had fallen, and each green being stood bare and stark against the cold sky, he led a crew of wide-shouldered young men up the nearest hill. They carried edge tools, saws, and axes, as another crew of earthmen had done 1,000 years before. The green being, almost unconscious in dormancy, watched them come. There was nothing it could do. It would feel no pain, but it knew its fate, and it knew that it would be the first of many. An earth house, Sam said, paneled, floored, and with stairways and porches of fine-grained wood. The resins and oils give protection from decay and allow a fine finish, he smiled. And no earthman ever before had a home trimmed with the flesh of God. And he never suspected that the green beings, as their numbers grew fewer year by year, also had their dream of God. They spread their leaves to the warm sun. Their chloroplast trapped the rays, and they built them into the substances. They kept all things alive, but they knew that their sun was not God. To the great green beings, God, the ultimate God, was energy.